Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's really lovely to see everybody and so many people. When I thought about having the session, I wasn't sure how many people would come. I know that Addison is an entertaining speaker, but none of you really know him except those of us from Cape Town who have always had such a warm relationship with him. And it really is great to be able to have him with us. I hope you don't mind, Dr. Schonland, if I call you Addison in this forum. It's a very formal forum. I think we're all in this world. I heard today of, I don't know when things are going to get better. I don't know when I'm going to go travel. I don't know. Nobody knows what's going on. And one of our biggest things that we don't know about is what's going on overseas. And a very big indicator is the travel industry, is the airline industry. And so I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to hear a internationally recognized expert on that, so that we can really get a broader perspective than just our own. We know that our local industry is in real trouble, unfortunately, with SAA. On one hand, the other airlines are all battling. Everyone's battling. No one's really traveling. There's a little bit of business going on, and I have a friend of mine who had to travel from Joburg to Cape Town because he had an illness in the family. He said it was just to walk into the airport was dead. It was horrible. But that's local, and it would be nice to hear what's happening in the broader spheres as well. So welcome everybody, and a very huge welcome to Dr. Addison Schonland, who's going to be who's going to be speaking to us, addressing us, and answering questions. Addison, it's just really fantastic to see you, because we used to, when we lived in Cape Town, we used to I'm sorry, it is the rabbi speaking. We used to shoot a lot behind the bimah during, not during davening, Khalila, just, during the places during davening where we could talk. And it's just wonderful to be able to reconnect with you and to Ethel and Stephanie and the whole family who have come in and joined us. So really a very big welcome to you. And just going to, I think if you'd like to maybe give a few introductory remarks, and then we can carry on with some specific questions, if that works for you.
Sure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Then I can give you some perspective, I think. So can you see the
yes,
screen?
We can see it.
Okay, great. So what I want to show you here is some recent history. The blue bars are the number of flights in the United States. And you can see that around, I would say, this date, March the 18th, the waterfall began.
Wow.
Flights were canceled, and this is the number of flights coming back. Why did the flights cancel then? Look at what happened to traffic exactly on the 8th. There was an average of 85 people on a flight. The next day, it had gone down to 72. With a few days, it dropped down here to an average of 11. Now, when you look at, if you're operating an airline, excuse me, I've got something in my throat. When you operate an airline, an average flight has 160 seats. To break even, which is not to be profitable, just to break even, you need to have a load factor, which is the percentage of seats that have been bought, not the number of people on board, because surprisingly, there are quite a few people that ride for free, but you had a paid load factor of around 65 to 70%. So you can tell when you get to that level of seats. Nurse Nightingale saved me. When you look at that kind of load factor, 11 people, you really would need more like 115 to break even, 110 to break even. Here we were 10% of what the airlines need to stay in business. And so what you see is this huge drop off on the orange line, and the airline's trying to chase that. And now we have what looks like a recovery, but you can see the recovery is very, very spotty, up and down, because there's so much uncertainty. The recovery looks like it's going to be what's called the Nike swoosh, sharp drop off, and then, as you would see it, sharp drop off and then a slow recovery. And that's what we're seeing right now in the US. This kind of slow recovery, but it's very uncertain. If, for example, we continue to see a rise in infection rates, which we are seeing now, we have to look at the other key rate to look for is fatality rates. It appears that the medical professionals have learned a lot of how to save people. But also when I speak to people in the ER business, emergency room business, they tell me that every case is different.
Right.
Because everybody's, if you have preconditions, if you don't have preconditions. In the beginning, it was people that were elderly, obese. Turns out that's not how it is. It actually impacts people much younger.
Yeah.
So that's a very broad, big picture sizing of how we have seen a change in the States. When we look at projection, and what we're seeing here is that swoosh, and you can see how wobbly it becomes. It's nice and smooth, but now it's becoming wobbly. When we look out 90 days, we're estimating anywhere between 243 people per flight to, let's say, 61, which would be the average. Minus 121 obviously is not going to happen. So what you might see is that that tube shape might tilt a little further up. But it's a very uncertain situation. And if you realize that, for example, operating a 737, which you'd be familiar with, or the 320 in South Africa,
right,
that airplane probably runs around $5,000 an hour to operate.
Wow.
And the flight, let's say Cape Town, Joburg, which would be a reasonable metric, is going to be a $10,000 decision, obviously in the Rand equivalent. And if you don't have enough passengers to make that work, it doesn't matter which airline you are, you're in trouble, big trouble, because your costs stay active and there's no revenue, you're in big trouble. Here's an idea of what we did a year ago, average number of paying passengers per flight. And then the dark blue is what it looks like so far this year.
Wow.
Yes, there's been a recovery since April, sure. But we are far, far away from ever coming out of this in some sort of financial way that an industry can survive.
Now, are these
several years ago,
sorry, Addison,
American Express did a study where they looked at the number of people that are impacted by tourism. So if you can imagine, the front end of this is the airline industry. Whoever is, can you just mute yourself, please?
I'm trying to mute everybody there. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Muted.
So typically what happens is for every job in the economy, 1 in 16 is impacted directly by the travel industry.
Wow.
So for example, when you look at a place like developing economies, let's say South Africa would be qualified as a developing economy. Tourism is an incredible employer because it's a service industry. You need people to service people. You need the taxi drivers, you need the cleaners, you need the cooks. You need all these people to service the traveler. So when you look at what happens with air travel, it is a very critical barometer to understand what the impact is going to be downstream in an economy. It's a really very important part of the industry. I spoke to the gentleman who runs the Royal Aeronautics Society in England, and he said an interesting thing to me. He said, what we've discovered in the world economy is there's a golden thread that runs through the whole economy called travel. Air travel. When you take that golden thread away, it's amazing what the downstream impact is on everybody.
Right.
Doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're not immune. It's going to hurt you. So I'll stop sharing this screen now to, that's my introductory remarks, I guess.
Wow. So from what I can see, I'm just trying to understand, it seems to be, according to that first graph, that there's still a lot of flying happening in the US.
Okay, so what do we call a lot? On an average day, we would have 2.7 million passengers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
At the moment, we're like somewhere between 50 and 60,000.
Wow. So even though there's a lot of flights, they're very empty, and there's just
the average flight now is 59 people. Wow. That's the average flight.
Wow. So if one says that, then what are the challenges going forward are not just simply the COVID challenge. I mean, how does any airline survive that?
You go to the government and you say to the government, this wasn't my fault.
That sounds like SAA.
Well, I think SAA was in trouble before COVID.
Yeah, very much so.
I think the SAA situation is not unique. You've got Air India, you've got Pakistan. Wherever you have the state owning a company like an airline, the shareholder in that case does not behave like an economic shareholder. Shareholders always want to take care of business and they want to take care of their interests. When you have a state corporation, it's a place for putting your friends who vote for you.
Right. Okay.
So you don't find rational economic decisions being made.
Right.
And South Africa is not unique in that. You know, wherever you go in the world where you see large government corporations, they are padded with people.
Right. So in the States, they go to the government, and the government what gives them a bailout.
What the government has to do here is to you cannot make people fly because people are scared of flying.
Right.
So more and more people are flying now because our economy is a service economy.
Right.
And there's a limit to what you can do technologically like we're doing right now. What we're doing here today, we would never have done a year ago.
Okay.
But today we can do this. At the same time, if you are in the service industry and you need to go and see your customer or you need to go and solve a problem, you need to get there. The States is very, very big. That's why we don't have trains. The distances are just too big. If you can imagine from, let's say, New York to Los Angeles is 3,000 miles. That's Cape Town, Joburg, Cape Town, a few times just to go one way.
Right.
I'm sure many of the audience are familiar with the geography. You're not going to do that by train.
Right.
Don't have time.
So that's a vital part of the US.
Correct.
But what about internationally? What are they having the same challenges to the same extent? Because their trains, Europe has got quite a good rail network.
So Europe has got a very good rail network, a very good network also in China. China is a huge country, but they have high-speed trains, and that's all great. But when you've got lockdown, you've got lockdown.
Okay.
So, for example, you can catch a high-speed train in France and go from Paris to the south or the north or wherever, but you're living in a bubble. Even the European Union does not want to have travel between Germany and Spain. The Germans and the Spanish now, because we're going into summer, the Germans want to go on vacation. Spain's going to be very cheap this year for them. So they want to go. So now they're trying to work out, can they make a travel bubble between those two countries and allow people to fly literally over Switzerland, over the south of France to get there. We have the same kind of interest in New Zealand and Australia. They're trying to create a travel bubble between them because they feel that they have, certainly New Zealand feels that they have COVID under control.
Yeah, until they get a visit.
As we've discovered, all you need is one sneeze.
Yeah. And it starts again.
And not only do you stop, you actually go in reverse.
Yeah.
About 10 days ago, maybe 7 to 10 days ago, everybody in the States had trouble with their cell phones. The government rolled out through the cell companies a tracking system to know where everybody is relative to other people that come down with COVID, so that we could be told you've been exposed to somebody that you may not even know about.
Wow.
Good thing is that we have the technology. The bad thing is we're being spied on. Not that we weren't being spied on before, but now we're being spied on twice. Once by the security people and once by the medical people Who knows? Maybe the tax guys are next.
Oh, well, hope not. Huh? Well, hope you cleared and all ready to go. Okay. So that's the case. I mean, I'm not, you showed that graph where things are going to start plateauing and things are going to starting to grow a little bit, but will air travel as we know it, at least while COVID is present in whichever form it is, I mean, what is the thought thinking about, will it ever be the same? Will it, will we once again be able to just sit down next to some stranger that we never met and hope they don't talk to us, and fly?
It's a great question. And I think we need to have maybe some context to that question. But this is not the first pandemic. We remember we had N1H1, we had SARS. Nobody stopped traveling.
Right.
Those were also global pandemics that spread around. How did COVID spread? By air travel.
Right.
My sense of it is that a lot of what we're doing now with COVID is politicized.
Okay.
So that is a backdrop. I would say that there is all sort of technological ideas coming out under pressure now to try and figure out what to do.
Right.
The airline, on a typical airplane, the air in the plane changes every 3 to 5 minutes, and the air blows from the roof down and then gets sucked out underneath the seats.
Okay.
So, and the filters on the airplane are the same as used in surgeries. The HEPA, HEPA filter.
Okay.
So the air is very clean. And still people are not satisfied. So now they're talking about how they're going to do the seats, how they're going to do, it doesn't matter. Airline economics do not work with distancing. Just doesn't make sense.
Sure, you have to put as many as you can.
It's not going to work. And no one wants to pay what the real value is of, strapping yourself to a seat in Cape Town and being in Johannesburg in 2 hours or less.
Right. So actually it's interesting because I saw this, I don't know how it popped up onto my Facebook feed, but I saw this thing where this guy has developed this like 2-tiered seating arrangement for planes. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Don't know where it's going to go, but I mean, if you are aware, can you explain it a little bit and whether it's actually viable? Because that might be a means of doing things.
I think the first thing we need to understand is, I would imagine everybody in the audience has been on a commercial airplane.
I would assume so.
Space is not something that is freely available. It's a tube.
Right.
And the way airlines work is they put as many people in that tube as possible because that's the way they make money. It's just like a bus company or any other public transportation system. It's not, the economics don't make sense. And you're not going to push the seats out of, you cannot do crazy stuff, because what happens next year when there's no COVID? Now you have to reset the seats again?
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So they have all these ideas. The bottom line is, if you travel in the States right now and you walk on a plane, you don't wear a mask, you're not going to go on that airplane. You're not going. No one wants you on the plane.
Right.
And the flights we have are by many other countries. By many other countries, we fly long hauls. No drinks, no food, no water.
Is that what's happening now? The long haul flights are where nothing's being served and things are still happening.
4 hour coast to coast. You have to bring your own stuff if you want anything.
Wow. But there is still then, not significant, but there is still a bit of international travel happening.
No, that's domestic in the US.
Okay.
So for example, if you want to fly from New York to Hawaii, that's 10, 11 hours.
Right. That's domestic travel still considered.
That's
right?
still domestic. If you want to fly from, I don't know, New York, let's say Miami to Seattle, that's 6 hours. Wow. It's a lot of space.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? You have to wear a mask the whole time.
Yeah.
Unless you're eating or drinking, then you have to put your mask on again. It's a balagan.
It's pretty intense. I saw that Etihad Airlines are using this time to effectively upgrade their fleet. They spring cleaning all the carpets. They're putting in new seats where they need new seats. There's a whole lot happening. And as I was looking at and watching it, it must cost them a fortune. I'm sure. I mean, they've obviously got quite a lot of cash, but surely, as the with all the airlines being grounded at the moment, is there real value in that? Number one, and then we'll speak about. Let's start with that question. Is there real value in these airlines busy upgrading their flights at this point in time?
Etihad, let me point out, is owned by a state, and that means that the typical economic mathematical decisions are not the same. They have a relatively new fleet, so it's nice to be able to tweak it. But why would you put new seats in new airplanes? To me, that sounds a little bit like nice PR.
Yeah, it was great PR.
Bottom line is they got no passengers, so what are they going to do? Okay, we're going to clean the planes. Great.
Right. Which apparently the planes need to be constantly cleaned and up and turned on and all these things to make sure that they.
Yeah. Parking a plane is really easy. Restarting it is quite difficult because there are incredible safety requirements for you to be able to carry passengers. It's an industry that has a zero tolerance for safety, negative impacts on safety.
Right.
A crash at any airline impacts all airlines. You know, when you think about walking onto an airplane, you don't know who the pilot is.
Right.
Is the pilot in a good mood, in a bad mood? Did the pilot get enough sleep last night? Is the pilot feeling suicidal today? Wouldn't you like to know that?
Sure.
No one talks about that. So when you strap yourself to the seat, it's mamash, an act of faith. You say tefillah derech, and you hope for the best.
Wow. Glad we're in lockdown. Wow. Well, that's quite intense. And wow.
Well, think about it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. You put your hands in the.
Pretty much the same when you get on an Egged bus.
Yeah, but there you have Hashem looking after you, because that's.
But you still say tefillah derech.
That's true. I hear. Just to move on a little bit, this whole thing that's happening now with the A380, which was at that point in time was the future of all air flights and everything like that. So two things. Firstly, I understand that it's been discontinued, and also I read an article that in the United States there are no A380s being operating at all, which was quite fascinating considering the numbers. I mean, you mentioned millions of people traveling up and down. Would you mind just expanding on those 2 points a little bit?
Sure. Firstly, I'm a big fan of the 380. I've flown it several times. It is the most comfortable ride I've ever had. In fact, I would say that when I have flown on the 380, the conversation, the volume of our voices right now, at takeoff, when that plane rolls down the runway and it's about 1.2 million pounds, it's a lot of weight when it's a full airplane.
Wow.
You and I would not have to raise our voices. That's how quiet it is.
Wow.
It's incredible. It's a great ride. The difficulty was that Airbus needed to develop an alternative to Boeing 747. In the business, in the aerospace business, if you're making something that no one else makes,
right,
then everybody has to buy from you. And what happened was Boeing used to make fabulous profits from the 747.
Okay.
Those profits, Rabbi, I know you know a little bit about accounting. Transfer pricing allowed Boeing then to say, well, I'm going to take that profit there and I'm going to put it into the 737 or the 757 or the 777. Right. And so everything just worked great. But without a device to compete with the 747, Airbus was at a disadvantage.
Okay.
So in game theory, they had to end up building a 380. A lot of people don't know this, but before the 380 came out, Boeing and Airbus were actually going to collaborate on a plane together.
Right, I read that, yes.
And then Boeing decided, no, this is not the future. At the same time, Boeing was developing something called a sonic cruiser. Then came 9/11, and the Sonic Cruiser went out the window, and they had to reinvent this thing called the 787. What we have today is what we call mega cities. Johannesburg, London is a mega city market. Johannesburg, Paris is a mega city market. New York, London is a mega city market. But interestingly enough, Joburg, London, and Joburg, Paris, and even Joburg, Frankfurt are mega city markets where the 380 is successful. The 380 is successful also between Johannesburg and Dubai because it's a hub to a hub.
Okay.
What's interesting is between London, Heathrow, and New York, you have somewhere in the range of like 40 flights a day.
Wow.
And you'd say to yourself, that would be logical to put 380s in and cut down the air pollution, cut down the noise, cut down everything. And the airlines tell us, no, that's not what our customers want. Our customers want to have multiple times a day that they can choose a flight. So American and British Airways, between them, they have 16 flights a day.
Wow.
16 between London and New York.
That's unbelievable.
Then you have Virgin and Delta with another 16. And so it goes. So that literally you can have a flight every hour on either one of those airlines.
Wow.
And so you've got a strange thing. So the 380, in certain places, it really works well. Like, I'll give another example of a craziness. Cathay Pacific flies 2 747s, now it's a 777, from Hong Kong to London Heathrow. And those flights land within 45 minutes of each other.
Wow.
Why wouldn't you fly
one massive
on a 380? British Airways used to have 3 flights a day, London to LA. They decided, you know what, we're not going to fly 3, we'll fly 2 380s. They now carry more people at less cost between London and LA. Now, this is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So the 380 is a special machine. It works in for certain airlines that are big, that have the ability to feed this monster, because you're talking about 550 seats in one smack.
Wow.
So there's a lot of overhead involved in that airplane. In the meantime, what's happened is the airlines have been able to figure out, well, what happens if we avoid hubs? So for example, if you're American Airlines out of Dallas and you can say, I can fly nonstop from Dallas to Rome twice a day with a 777 or a 787, I can do that very cost effectively. And because I've got so many options for people, no one can compete with me because I'm going to go nonstop. And all of a sudden, smaller airplanes that you could do several flights a day, economics kick in, and you say, wait a second, I can actually do something clever. And that's what also helped to undo the 380.
Wow. Wow. So the dream of many traveling is actually economically not as viable or desired as they would have thought initially.
No, they had to take this bet because they had to try and offset the 747 super profits. And then things happened differently.
Wow.
The world shifted underneath their feet. It's you roll the dice. It's like every business.
Okay. So I think, Addison, thank you so much. It's been fascinating just to hear different things about what's going on. Can you give us just some closing words? Just, we called it COVID and the airlines the future. What is the future holding from what you're seeing? Is there going to be a merging of some of the airlines because of the costs? Are there going to be a whole lot of new things that are going to come out of this, different ways of doing things on the airlines, with the airlines? Just a kind of like a broad picture, just to end our session this evening.
Well, I think that firstly, consolidation is almost certainly going to happen. The question is who and how. Certain countries feel that it's very important that their country has a national flag airline. So they're going to protect, for example, does South Africa need SAA? Do you need, as a South African, do you need to fly South African Airways if you want to go anywhere? The odds are not really.
Right.
You don't need it. Is it nice to have? Well, it depends what you define as nice. Is it a sort of, the flag and all that stuff? Well, do taxpayers really get a benefit out of that? Or is it the political thing? So that's a public policy debate. I'm not involved with that sort of thing. I think that there's clearly going to be consolidation, but the consolidation is going to happen within a framework of what will be politically acceptable.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. Despite what Greta Thunberg would like us to do, we're not going to go back to the Stone Age of wagons and ponies and horses. We're going to fly.
Right.
That's just the way it is. The question is, how do we do it? Will there be changes in behaviors? Certainly, passengers will be much more aware of the ability of them to carry disease with them. So, for example, we're already seeing now at several airports, Heathrow's being one of them, they have a device that as you walk towards this device, it takes your temperature.
Okay.
So you can expect probably intrusive things happening to you as a traveler. But that's to protect you and everybody else around you.
Right.
You cannot,
The same Zoom I was on earlier.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I totally got thrown by that. So I think that we're going to see changes for sure. But I don't think we know fully yet what it's going to be. You're seeing crews on several airlines now dressed up like they're in moon suits, as if they work in a factory that's super clean.
Right.
That's not practical.
Yeah.
It's just not practical. It's going to be an evolving thing. As passengers, we're going to probably have to spend more time traveling now. You have to get to the airport earlier. It's going to be a bind.
Yeah.
But that's the way it's going to be for us to travel. But we're still going to want to do this.
Sure, because we still want to see what's going on in the rest of the world. It's like,
again, your audience in Johannesburg, what proportion of those people in the audience today have family, 10 hours away by plane?
Sure.
Are they going to stop seeing them forever?
Sure.
Is that okay? Are they going to do Zooms forever? Do they want to kiss little grandchildren?
Yeah.
You go through some hassle for that? Of course you would.
Yeah, that's very real, because I think that's the Unterschied here, is that people will want to, there's simchas and their tragedies, and people want to get there. They want to be there. They want to be part of their friends and their families' lives. And so I've got a few questions that I think you've answered most of them. But one of the questions that has come out is the pricing of travel going forward. We've been prior to COVID, I think we were very spoilt in a way, because they were all these new budget airlines kept on popping up, most of them closed in South Africa at least. But there are these budget airlines. Everyone was fighting for passengers. But now that travel is becoming less of a kind of like a necessity for everybody, but more like it's becoming more of a luxury, I think, and everyone's a little bit more circumspect before they'll travel. What are they looking at pricing wise in terms of how the airlines will be responding to this?
So the good news for the consumer, I think, is what we're seeing in the States. Southwest Airlines has already started a fare war.
Wow.
Because how do you buy people back on an airplane? People are afraid.
Right.
Because the bottom line is, with COVID, it does kill people.
Yes.
Do you want to take that risk? Well, no, I don't want to take that risk for $100, but for $45 or $35, maybe I'll take a chance.
Wow.
Maybe if I wear a mask and I can get an empty seat next to me, and I'll fly at a weird hour when the traffic should be lower than before. We're lemmings. They know we behave in a very predictable way.
Right.
The airline industry will find a price point at which to draw us back in, and before we know it, we'll be back we're back on the treadmill.
Just
I'm going, and just it works. Just works. It's not the first time the industry's had a crisis.
Yeah.
Something that many people may not be aware of. Air travel over the history, consistently, air travel doubles every 15 years.
Wow.
That's a rock solid trend. So we have a shock now, sure. But 15 years from now, what do you think is going to be? Well, where would you think we will be? We'll be back on the wagon, back strapped to a seat. That's where we'll be.
Right. With the stranger next to us. I had someone say to me, "Oh, the stranger that they sat next to became their wife." So that's wonderful. I have a question here from Greg. If we can just ask that, it could be construed that the airline industry caused the pandemic by not implementing these air cabin control measures before. Will this blame affect their bailout?
No, you can't blame the airlines for this. No one knew. No one knew. You could see from the drop-off in traffic. No one knew. Why, for example, would an airline put its own people, its personnel, at risk if they knew that there was something happening? That's not I don't think that's a fair assessment. You could say, you could have a tiner on the Chinese for not being more open.
Yeah.
But, in their defense, did they really know what was going on? Again, remember I mentioned at the start of this, a lot of this has been politicized. So if you were a Chinese doctor that identified this, yes, you probably disappeared because you weren't good for business. And then suddenly the thing blew up and it was, oh, well, maybe we overreacted. Well, politicians do that. They're not very smart. Right. They don't have a higher order of thinking. And they make decisions based on feelings.
Right.
And they will say it's based on data, but actually the data they're looking at is, approval ratings.
Yeah, public support. Sure.
Right. And so, I don't think the airline industry was to blame for this at all. They got hammered worse than anybody else. And what's interesting is when you have a situation like this, they get hammered first and they'll be the last to recover. That's a huge gap.
Yeah. Okay, Greg, I hope you're happy with that. Got a question here from Craig. He spoke about the prices, but that's great. That's good to know that soon we'll be able to travel with 100% risk, but at 20% of the price. That's a lot of fun. Addison, thank you so much. If anyone else wants to ask any questions, we've got a couple of minutes. I just want to really just to acknowledge your time that you spent on us. I know you're a consultant and your time is valuable to you, but it's been really valuable to us just to be able to present a different thing. Often as a community, we spend a lot of time in Shiurim, but we wanted to do something different. And the fact that you as a Shomer Shabbos Yid, with child in Kollel and from children, Baruch Hashem, and really, it's just wonderful to be able to see that you really are an embodiment of what we are as a community, of a frum community involved in the rest of the world. And please God, we should go from strength to strength. Sorry, I just see there is a question here. When do you foresee the swoosh kicking in the USA? So that can be our final question. And
it already has. It's already kicked in, as I showed you in the chart. Maybe I'll just show that screen again.
Thank you.
You can see that the swoosh started, I would say, probably around, if I look on them, around Wednesday, April the 15th. I think that's we bottomed out around mid-April. I don't know if that satisfied the questioner, but I think that's when the swoosh started. But you can see it's a bumpy ride.
Right.
Very bumpy ride.
And is that attributable to not just normal behavior or different aspects?
The thing is, there's so much uncertainty, right? So bear in mind, in the States, we're also in the midst of some crazy stuff happening on the streets.
Yeah.
We've got a perfect storm of nutcases doing nutty things. And America being the land of the free and home of the brave, I don't know what happens next. None of us really know. It's quite likely to get a bit more crazy before it doesn't. In fact, I heard a very funny comment this morning. We have elections on November the 4th. And my friend said to me, on November the 4th, COVID will end and Antifa protests in the street will end. Guaranteed. November the 4th is when it's all ending.
Right. That's the date. Okay. Well, Addison,
buy a lottery ticket.
So thank you so much. There's a beautiful, just to conclude, there's a beautiful poem that Rav Kook wrote, which I I think, we can, the rabbi can make any drosha. It always works well somehow. But Rav Kook wrote, he spoke about the human being. And I mentioned it last night at our tefillah service, but I think it's quite appropriate that Rav Kook said that alei lamala alei, that we need to keep going up. He wasn't talking about flight, but I think it's the same thing. Alei ki koach azlecha, because we've got strength. Yesh lecha kanfei ruach, we've got wings of the spirit, the wings of powerful eagles, and we just got to believe in them, and we've got to find them, and we can find them, and if we look for them, then we'll find them in a flash. He says, Yemtsa'u lecha miyad, we'll find them immediately. And I think that this is one of those things, alei, that one of our challenges is to go, and I think you mentioned it right at the beginning, the politicization of this, is that we've got to move beyond it, to move out of the fear that we are in as to what this terrible COVID is going to give, and start looking at where other places where there is a little bit of hope, where there are people are moving forward. And thank you for your contribution to that, because I think you've given us a good perspective, whilst it's really down and out like it is right now for us. But as we also, please God, will hit in that switch on every level, personal, financial, emotional, spiritual, then please God, we can also become part of the post-COVID, whenever that's going to be, society. And thank you once again for being part of our Mizrahi offering, and it's really been wonderful to speak to you. And thank you everybody for joining us. And please God, we'll all be able to hear only good things and good news, and just b'sorot tovot. God bless everybody. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Man, thank you.
Have a good night, Rabbi. Nice to see you again.
And you, Brad. God bless.